If our children are the seeds and we are their gardeners, how we plant them and the way we tend to them will determine if they reach their full bloom. So we choose to listen to our intuition, focus on connection, and stay deeply rooted in order to make the most of every season in motherhood. We don't have all the answers, and we probably never will. We are learning as they grow. This is our journey, and by sharing our truths, we hope to encourage anyone along the way. Welcome to the Learning as They Grow podcast. Hello, welcome back to Learning as They Grow. I'm your host, Alisha Foster. We are on episode 4 of Learning as They Grow. I am really excited to share this episode with y'all. This was not exactly an episode I had planned, but I was just inspired after an incident that recently happened with us and our girl. And I just feel it is important to share everything that we're going through and what we're learning along the way. That's kind of the whole point of this podcast is just sharing our experiences, what we learn, and how it can help other people. So this episode is going to be about setting boundaries with others for your child. So when looking into podcasts with similar topics, I came across a lot that were about setting boundaries with your child or setting boundaries with others, or just setting boundaries for yourself to be able to have, self-care and mental health and all of that. And as I listened to a bunch of different episodes, I thought, this is all very helpful. There's a lot of great stuff out there. Yes, it is important to set boundaries with your child. It is important to set boundaries for yourself so that you can be mentally and emotionally sound for your family. And it is important to set boundaries with others for your family as a whole, and just being able to say, no, we're not going to do that right now. We want to have time with our family, stuff like that. But I didn't find a lot of episodes regarding setting boundaries with others for your children. And that is something that I think is so important, especially when they're at the age that my little lady is at. She's 14 months. And so she's not able to express certain things for herself. So I just feel it is so important to share those things on how it is really our job to set those boundaries with other people and speaking up for them. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. So stay tuned for that. Before I get into all of that, I'm going to start with my highs and grow for this week. So my high was a spontaneous trip to the zoo. This was just a couple days ago. My girl and I were looking for something to do. We're always on the go. And we were given a couple of different passes to like the zoo or museums or play places for Ellington's birthday. That was something that for her first birthday, we asked people rather than toys and things like that. Like we were all set on all of that. We were very fortunate to have everything we need. We instead wanted to invest in experiences with her. And like I said, we're always on the go. So I thought, what better way than to ask for things like that if people wanted to give gifts. It was not something that was required. We really just love the idea of partying with people to celebrate someone and visit with others. So that was really what her first birthday was about. But if people felt inclined to get gifts, we asked for experiences. So all that to say, we had some zoo passes and we were really excited to go check it out. And this is actually her third time to the zoo in 14 months. When she first went, she was a little bitty. She slept the whole time, but it was more so for my husband and I, just to go, and we had a good time. But then the second time she was mobile and walking around and she had a great time. We met a new friend there and spent a good amount of time at the playground just because that's where we met the friend. And we were socializing and letting them interact. But this time it was just me and Ellie, and we got to walk around. And now that she's getting older and she's making animal sounds and she's got such good receptive language, like she really understands what I'm telling her. A lot of times I was able to really use this opportunity of going out as a teachable experience for her. And so it was so much fun. And this was the first time we've seen a lot of the animals out. I don't know if it's the season with it being spring and it was a little breezy outside, so it wasn't too hot, or if it was the time of day that we went, I don't know, but it was just perfect. Like the seals were out and swimming around. That was her first time ever to see seals. So that was really fun. And I love water animals. So it was just really cool. They're so majestic as they swim around. And I could just tell the wonder in her eyes whenever she saw them for the first time, like, what is this creature? And then of course they like pop up onto the platform and it's like, whoa, they're out of the water. What is that attached to their body? Those are some weird tails and hands and all of that. So that was fun. And then we got to see the big cats. This is the first time we've seen the lions and I think it was not the cheetahs, maybe the leopards were roaming around. And so that was really fun. And she has been making tiger sounds lately. So it was cool to see she actually like connected. She saw a lion and went roar. And I'm like, yeah, they make the same sound. Those are big cats. So it was just a great time. And so yeah, that was my high of the week. Sorry. I highly encourage you, no matter the age of your child, get out and enjoy experiences. It doesn't have to be a big full day. It doesn't have to be something planned, but just even taking them. I love taking her like to the pond down the street in the neighborhood nearby. There's ducks and there's a bridge we go over, and there's just so many teachable moments to be able to talk to her and immerse her in real life things while I'm teaching her, and that vocabulary is being built. And it's just really awesome to get to see their mind work and let them roam around. It's really great for motor skills. And so, yeah, I highly encourage that. If you are waiting until they get older because you think they're just not going to remember, I would recommend just jumping in and doing it. It's a great experience. And you can look back at pictures and tell them about it. But it is, even if they don't remember these moments right now, it is building the person that they are. They're able to, like I was saying, be immersed into the real life experiences of learning with vocabulary and physically touching things that you can't really just tell them how something feels if they've never felt. For example, we went to the aquarium one time and my little girl touched a stingray. Like, how cool is that to get to touch a stingray at 12 months old? And I was trying to explain that it was a little slimy, but it was smooth. And like, yeah, I could sit at home and let her play with, different slimy, smooth things. But that was cool to be able to say, hey, you now know what a stingray feels like. So yeah, that is my little spiel about getting your kids out, experience, have fun. Okay. My grow for the week. This one is kind of a grow for this season in my life. It's not even just this week, but it is just something that I'm really going through and just feeling and kind of just want to share with y'all. So where we are at in our lives, my husband and I and my daughter, I feel like we're in a limbo with a lot of things in our life. So we are wanting to move. We are looking for our forever home, but it's not the right market to do so. We know what we're looking for and we know where we're looking for it. And it's just becoming a constant thing that I'm kind of obsessing over. I'm like, oh, every day I look and I really want to move, but it's not the time right now for us because it just isn't happening. Like the house that we want is not out there right now in the area. And we don't want to settle for it if this is going to be our forever home. So that's a big limbo for us. There's stuff going on with my husband's job where he's just not happy, but he's working a ridiculous amount of hours. And that, is really hard to have to see him as the sole provider for our family. He needs a job and that's great, but money doesn't buy happiness. So he's in a limbo right now with that and trying to figure out what the next step for himself is going to be. And then with our girl right now, she's in a big transition of moving into toddlerhood, kind of learning her emotions. And we're trying to figure out some new things. We're figuring out stuff with sleep and potty training and different ways of expressing herself. And it feels just like we're in this limbo of like, I know these things are temporary. I know these things will pass. I know we're going to get on the other side and we're going to be stronger, but it's a funky season for our family right now. And it is bonding us and helping us kind of, just hold on to each other and communicate with each other and talk through our needs. But my biggest growth from it that I think I'm getting is that I need to remember to stop expecting things to fast forward maybe to where we want them to be, and really step back and trust God with his timing, because we could just jump up and go find a beautiful home and say, this is it, we are going to make this happen. But there's a reason it's not happening yet. God has something bigger in store for us, is how we feel. With things going on with my husband's job, it's like he's in this limbo of like, I feel like I can do great things here, but I just need to get to a certain time frame with everything and know that this is where I need to be. And so again, like, we're not going to take the reins on that and dictate how that's going to go. We really need to just step back and say, God, what is your plan for this? And with our girl, we know that she's going to go through transitions, and we know they're temporary, but it is hard trying to figure out what the next best thing to do for her is regarding these transitions, how to support her needs while still setting her up for success on learning certain things on her own. So it's just a stage for us that we're really having to lean into each other, but mostly lean into God and say, we're trusting your timing, God, and this is a season and this is going to pass. So that's kind of where I'm at with all of that. And so if you are the praying kind, I ask you to please pray for my family and just really being patient and letting God take the reins on this. The old saying, let go and let God, but it's so much easier said than done. And I tell that to people, but I know when you're in that moment, it really is hard to let go and trust that God's going to place certain things in your path when the time is right. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And just pray for us on that, please. We're going to continue to grow closer to God, hopefully through this, and closer to each other as a marriage and a family and a unit. So yeah. All right. Let's jump into the whole big topic of this episode: setting boundaries with others for your child. So I am a note taker. That's how my brain works. I have to get it all out in order to make sure I don't just go on tangents, which I still sometimes do. And those who know and love me just know that that's just something about me. And if it's not for you, then I'm sorry. I'm really trying to just get all my thoughts out here. But we had an incident where we were put in a really uncomfortable situation with an acquaintance's husband, and the way he was just behaving towards our Ellington. And it just triggered my husband and I a little bit to really be more proactive about not putting her in certain positions, not putting ourselves in certain positions, and making sure that we set safe boundaries for her. So that is kind of what triggered this episode for me and inspired it to just, it's unraveled now into a couple different layers. So I came home after that incident, and after my husband and I talked about it, and of course made sure our girl was safe, everything was good. I just jotted down everything I could think of, and I have just this mess of a sheet because my brain was just everywhere with it. But I'm going to try to consolidate this topic, this episode, into 3 main points, and I'll kind of unravel those as we go. So the first one being talking about setting boundaries when it comes to your child being exposed to new people in new settings. We'll talk about that. And then the second subtopic, I guess, is going to be speaking up for your children, especially when they can't, especially at this stage. And then the last one is going to be about protection being more important than politeness. I think this is huge. And yeah, I'm just so excited to kind of talk through all this and really hopefully put some stuff out there that can help people avoid putting themselves, their children or their family in certain situations that just don't feel right for them, and avoiding any future trauma that might happen for your children just because of certain boundaries that aren't in place for them. So let's get started. We're going to talk about new people and new settings. I saw something that a friend shared with me, because every time my sweet friend and I get our girls together, they're just a month apart, they are one of them is not themselves. There is always something that we're like, oh my gosh, why are they clinging a little bit more? Or why are they being a little more aggressive today? Or why are they being a little more fussy today? And I found that this friend and I are constantly like trying to explain to each other, like, this is not how my baby is. Like, oh, I'm so bummed you're not getting to see who they really are. But it's also because every time we do a play date, we are trying to squeeze it into a 30-minute to an hour window because our girls were younger at the time, and their wake windows are only so big. By the time you drive somewhere, you really only have a certain amount of time to play and have fun before you have to drive them back home and get ready for another nap. So this kind of made me think as her and I were talking about this. And I will say, update, they're now 13 and 14 months old, and they have had many successful play dates now, and we're looking forward to doing it more often. And we're making it to where we meet is like a regular location. It's comfortable for both of them, and it's kind of consistent on what to expect. They're getting more comfortable with each other, with myself and my friend, and so they're really being able to let loose and have fun and just be themselves, and we're able to enjoy that time with them. But she sent me something whenever we were going through that like awkward, like, this is not who they are, I'm so sad you didn't get to see them. She sent me a video that was discussing that children take 45 minutes to warm up to a new setting or new people before they can really engage in active learning and play. And I thought, this is so interesting, but it makes so much sense. And I'm sure the 45 minutes is a estimate. It's not going to be the same for every child. Some kids are more shy and might take that full 45 minutes. And some kids are a little more social and might take just 5-10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then they're out and they're free and they're themselves. But I think it's so necessary to talk about that there is going to be a window of warming up, and that's okay, and respecting that of our children, because a lot of times I feel like we put pressure on our children for sure, but also on ourselves of like wanting everyone to see the person that our child is because they're amazing, right? But then we get them somewhere and it's like, oh, they're not being themselves. I'm really bummed. Or are people judging? Or what are people thinking? And it's so silly. Instead, we need to set this boundary of not expecting them to be any certain way around new settings and new people. Instead, we need to be that safe zone for them. If they want us to hold them for the first 15 minutes or so of walking around a new place, if they want us to be right next to them or just console them with certain things, and showing them that you're comfortable in this setting and showing them that you're their safe zone. Sometimes places are overstimulating for children. So you can walk into a new setting and you can be doing everything to meet that child's emotional needs, but they're just overstimulated. There's a lot of sound, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of lights. They could have had a hard day and be a little more tired. They could be going through a leap or teething and just really are stimulated too much by these things. So respecting those boundaries and saying, you know what, it's okay if we need to step away and have a quiet moment together. And if I'm missing out on some of the fun socializing with my friends or my family or whoever it may be, that's okay. This is what I need to do for my child. So I think that's just really helpful for them. And as that gets established, as that boundary gets established where they know you're going to meet those emotional needs for them and you're going to give them that time, I do think that estimate of time starts to get less and less. And of course, they're going to get more comfortable in certain settings. And then you're going to go to a new setting and change it up. And then they're going to be like, wait a second. But just understanding that you can't expect them to be 100% on as soon as you get somewhere. Okay. So don't brush it off if they're clinging a little more. You need to respond to that need. Saying stuff to them like, don't be so shy, or what's wrong with you? Or why are you being like this? Things like that are not going to help them settle in and get comfortable. In fact, it's going to help them or hurt them and make them build some walls around and be probably more timid next time they go, because they're not feeling, not only is this new place, these new people are not safe for them, but now you're not being a safe place. And I know sometimes with wanting to be around friends and family and stuff, like I was saying, it might be a pressure of like, man, they're not seeing who they are. Some people might feel embarrassed by how their kid might be behaving because they don't want people to think that they're this clingy kid, or they're this fussy kid, or they're this bad kid, as people want to call. But instead saying, I know who that kid is, and I'm not worried about what anybody else is thinking, and being that safe zone for them. When they feel that from you as their, attached person, their provider, their number one parent, or whatever it may be, they are going to appreciate that. And that's going to help them as they get older to be able to say, hey, mom, I know we're at a new place, but I'm going to go play over here. I know you're there. I know we're good. I now know how to regulate my emotions and get comfortable with new settings and new people instead of forcing them into it. So that was a big one for me. I wanted to talk about, and mostly because I was feeling that pressure myself. I was bummed that people weren't getting to see my girl for who she is. I'm like, she's so fun, and she's so playful, and she's so smart, and she's so funny. And it made me sad when we go to places and she wasn't being herself. And I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and I found myself feeling those things. And instead, I need to say, you know what? I'm going to go in expecting that she's not going to be herself, and being okay with that. And if she does get to come out of her shell, which within 10 to 15 minutes, this girl will be bossing you around usually and running around. But if she does get to come out of her shell and show people the amazing person she is, even better. But if not, I'm going to be her safe place for her. And I'm not going to make her feel unsafe by saying things like I said before, like, what's wrong with you? Or go play, like, give me a second. So yeah, that's just big. That's going to help me go into my next topic. So it's easy to say what we can do. I guess it's easier to say what we can do to make our children feel safe. But what about other people? The next topic I want to talk about is speaking up for them, especially when they can't. So this situation that we had going on with somebody made, there were a lot of red flags going off, but one of them that really bothered me was the person that I'm discussing cursed at my daughter, not in a mad way, like his tone wasn't bad, but he said something that I just didn't feel comfortable with. And she does have a lot of receptive language right now. And despite her knowing what those words mean, it's not how we talk to our daughter, and it's not how we're going to be talking around her. And so if we're around people who are doing that, we have to now set that boundary and say, we're not going to be around these people, or we have to teach our daughter, like, we're going to remove ourselves from these kind of people, because that's not our vibe that we're going to be going for. So a thing that this person said was, give your mom a GD minute, and wanted to take my daughter to give me a minute. Well, first of all, let's unravel that. My husband and I don't say GD. If you know what GD stands for, there you go. That is something that in my past life, I curse like a sailor. Like, I'm not going to look down on people who do, but just understanding that for us in our life now, we see that there's more power to words like that, especially including God's name in vain. And that is not something that we care to do in our household. We think it is a weak word, or obviously it's two words, it's a phrase, but we think it's weak, and we think it just is not going with our religious beliefs. And so it's not something that we choose to say anymore. So that was the first kind of like, hey, we don't say that. Of course, there's going to be people who say stuff around her all the time. We're not going to shelter her and have her never hear things. We know she's going to hear those things, but let's definitely not say that to her. And in the same context of giving your mom a minute. I've had people say this. I get that. Like, give your mom a minute. Like, she needs to go to the bathroom or she needs to go get some food. Like, give her a minute. Understandable. But when it's coming in a derogatory tone towards a child and their mother is having to sit back with strangers that their child doesn't know, and she's looking like, oh, I must give my mom a minute. I guess this is this strange man who's telling me this must be right. I didn't really like that. So that was just a small little tidbit of something somebody can say. Other things people can say that you can't control what people can say, but you can set those boundaries to show your child that you do not find that appropriate and you do not care to expose them to that. So there's so many other things that I'm sure are popping up in your head that you maybe heard people say to your kids that just don't feel right, don't feel like something that you want people saying to or about your children. And so that is a big boundary that I'm learning is going to be set for my child because she can't speak up for herself. So anytime somebody's talking negatively about her or her behavior, even if it's a little uncomfortable, it'll be like, hey, I prefer us not to say it that way. I think it's important that we set that boundary and we speak up for them. So I'm having a hard time thinking of examples. Like I said, I just kind of jotted down all of my thoughts and I'm spilling them out. If you're somebody listening right now and you have some great examples that have happened in your life, I'd love for you to comment below. Let me know some of those things and how you would have liked somebody to reword it. So I want to make it clear, I'm not going to tiptoe around every single thing somebody says. I'm not going to overanalyze every single thing somebody says. We are humans. We do say stuff. I say stuff a lot of times that I'm like, that's not really how I meant it. And then I have to rethink it. And that's what the whole purpose of this boundary is it's being intentional and understanding that words do have meanings. And so it is our job as parents to speak up for our children. So when somebody is putting them down, let's go back to the example of them not warming up in a social setting. If somebody is brushing off their feelings and putting them down in any type of way, or telling them stuff that is negative about their appearance, those kind of things need to be addressed. And it is uncomfortable, but you are their voice right now. And so this is a huge boundary that has to be set with people. And I think it's important to tell them if people are trying to get you to do certain things or say certain things, you need to teach them now. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. And set that boundary clear right now. So for example, with that situation that happened to us this last weekend, instead of my child or me going, yeah, they're wanting to give me a minute, like go on there with that stranger. I don't need to tell my child to do anything that's going to make them or myself uncomfortable just because I don't want to be rude. And that's another thing is like watching how you say that. Don't just teach your child to be polite and do something that is uncomfortable or doesn't feel good for them because you don't want to be rude. This is something I've heard from a friend who talked about how her daughter, when growing up, she always wanted to make sure that she was sharing and like not taking other people's stuff. And so she constantly told her stuff like, oh, no, it's okay. Like if another child took the toy, like, it's okay, he can have it. And she shared with me, now her daughter's 13 years old, and she shared with me that she wished that she wouldn't have done that as often, because what she taught her daughter to do now is letting people walk all over her and not respecting when her daughter does want to put up those boundaries because she feels that that might be rude. She doesn't want to hurt somebody else's feelings with that. So there is a hard, understanding of what is polite and what is not acceptable to allow in a boundary. Something that I saw a video of the other day, and it just made me so sad to see this parent just completely not setting this boundary, not respecting their child's boundary that they were trying to put in place, was this mom had reached out asking, what was going on with her daughter's behavior. And in the video, she had been acting out and doing different things. But then part of the video, they show, I don't know if it was an uncle or a dad or a grandpa or who it was, but he was wanting the little girl to come sit on his lap. And the little girl was maybe like 7 or 8 years old. And she is completely shutting down. She was not responding. She was kind of hiding under a table and just ignoring, the mom and the whoever the male figure's request was to have the little girl go sit on her lap. And instead of realizing that that child was trying to set a boundary for whatever reason, I don't know the history with that male, or if there's history with somebody else in her life where she was just not feeling it that day. But she instead, the mom was saying, don't be rude, why are you being a brat? Go sit on his lap, and allowing also that male figure to say those kind of things to her too. And it seems something very simple, just go sit on his lap, no big deal. Or just give so and so a kiss hello. Or, just let them do certain things that are just a boundary. The list goes on, and it's different for every family where that line of boundary is for you. It's important to find a boundary that you're comfortable with and your child is comfortable with. I can't tell you what that perfect boundary looks like, because your history and your upbringing might be different than mine, and your child's needs might be different than my child's needs. While I think everyone really is trying to just do the best for their child, whether that is doing better than the generation before them, or doing just equally as good. If they had a great upbringing and they're like, I just want to be able to have as safe, secure, and happy childhood as I grew up with, it's going to be different. So some people who grew up with an unsafe childhood might be a little more sheltering for their child. Now they might feel the need to be more protective because they did not have protection in certain areas as a child. And somebody who grew up with a beautifully perfect shell around them, that they knew they were always in a safe zone, might be a little naive to certain things out in the world. So they might not be aware of what harms could happen if you don't have boundaries for your child. So that's really for you to look at, what has happened in your life, what you feel comfortable with, talk with your partner about it. But really, the only thing I personally feel I can go off of is my gut instinct. And this is, again, where my gut instinct might be different than yours. I have certain triggers. My husband and I actually both were children who were exposed to childhood sexual abuse. And so this is something that we hear and see things very differently than somebody who has not experienced these things. So we have triggers that go off, and anxiety that happens in our mind that somebody may not even be aware about. But we are fortunate to have amazing grandparents on both sides, and being able to just openly talk to them about some of those triggers or set certain boundaries early on. And it can be uncomfortable sometimes to have these conversations, because the grandparents of your child were also parents of you, and you turned out great. But there is also a whole new world of conversation that's happening amongst people about parenting styles. And there's a whole community of different parents who now bond together and are able to discuss their types of parenting styles. And people might say, oh Lord, you're in that group, that's not how we raised you, and you turned out just fine. But it's a learning opportunity, not only for yourself to figure out what kind of parent you are, but it is a learning opportunity for your parents now as grandparents to say, wow, look at the child that I brought up, and look at how responsive she's being to her child, and look at how she has learned from her childhood the positives and the hardships, that she is going to do amazing things for now our grandchild. So again, we're fortunate that our parents were able to have some of those conversations with us and see it in that light, rather than push against some of the uncomfortable things we might have had to talk about in the beginning. But I just encourage you to do that as well. Find out what kind of parent you are and make that clear. And you might get mocked for certain terms. I know the term gentle parenting can often be misconstrued. People might see it as, oh geez, those kids are just running their parents' lives and you have to ask to change their diaper. And I'm not going to lie, when I first heard some of these things, when it comes to gentle parenting or responsive parenting, I thought as well, that's silly. What are you're gonna ask a newborn to change their diaper? But it's really not, it doesn't have to be that. Gentle parenting is just really boils down to respecting your child's needs. And some people will say, oh my gosh, it's so silly. Those children run their parents' life and they, can go far on that end. But that doesn't have to be the case. You can fall kind of in the middle like we do and just say, we're going to respond to our child's needs. And if you're asking her for something like a kiss or a hug or come sit on my lap or something like that, and she's clearly not wanting to do that, we're not going to force it. I'm not going to say, you must give them a kiss or make them very uncomfortable in that situation. However, I do feel it is important to say hello to somebody whenever you are, greeting them, whenever you enter their home. So yes, you will, as my child, say hi in some way. If that's not with a kiss or a hug, it can be with a wave or a high five, whatever they're feeling for the day. So that's kind of a boundary that we have set in saying, you know what, she's not really feeling a kiss right now, don't force it. And we've been fortunate that people respect that. If there's certain people that you're like, I just don't feel comfortable with males changing my daughter's diaper, that's obviously from my triggers in my past, but it's a boundary that I need set for my mental health. And I think if you share that with people of, hey, this is why we do it this way and this is how we do it, and they actually respect it because of your why. So for us, it's not that I ask my daughter to change her diaper, but I just inform her and say, hey, we're going to change your diaper right now, or I'm going to wipe your face, okay? And maybe I'm not fully on the gentle parenting side, but I'm definitely not on the unresponsive side as well. So maybe I fall a little bit in the middle, but just being able to say, this is what feels right for us with our child, and we hope that you can do the same, and being able to share that with people. When somebody is forcing something that the child is clearly pushing against, and they don't have a protective guardian to say, hey, she's not feeling that right now, let's not push that, then blurred lines happen. They suddenly feel unsafe as to, well, my mom's making me do this. And even if that male figure was not going to harm that child in the video that I was referring to in any way, shape, or form, if there's no history with anything, but he just simply is like, I want my grandchild to come sit on my lap and she needs to do that, there still is a line because the child is uncomfortable. And so having the parent forcing that on them is now showing that child that their wishes and what they're comfortable with as a person as well, because your child is still a person, they are not being respected now. And so they're not going to feel safe to be able to tell you when they get older and somebody else is forcing something that may be more serious. So that boundary is huge for us. And that's just something that I, find important to realize, that there's a difference between, this will lead me into my next point, being polite towards people and protecting your child. And you can sometimes fall into the situation that I fell into this with the situation that I was talking about in the beginning with the acquaintance's husband. I struggled with being polite. I didn't want to sound rude when I felt in the beginning that this acquaintance and her husband were just trying to give me a minute. They just were saying, hey, mama, you're doing so much. We see you running around taking care of her. He's got her, no worries, like go hang out. And I'm like, okay, let me appreciate that. And I will be polite with it. But then my gut was telling me there was uncomfortableness with him secluding himself with her. And again, there may have been nothing negative that was happening, but I had red flags going off. I looked towards my husband and talked with him, and he had red flags going off, and therefore a boundary needed to be set. And so that's where we had to say, you know what, protection is more important than politeness. And so we had to have some uncomfortable conversations and just say, yeah, we see that he's down there with her and we appreciate that, but we're going to take her back now. And it got to a point where we had to say, you know what, we're going to leave the situation because boundaries are still being not respected. And of course, we're not saying all of this to them, and you can if you want, but for us, we just kind of talked amongst ourselves and we removed ourselves from the situation. So that was a huge boundary for us in that moment. So keeping in mind that while it is uncomfortable sometimes to have these conversations with people, it is important to set that boundary, make it clear. Don't worry about if you're going to ruffle feathers, be impolite, or hurt somebody's feelings. Because in the end of the day, what's most important is your family unit. And if they're feeling disrespected or that their feelings are not being respected at all in any way, or they're feeling unsafe, that is where there's an issue. You know, and some people might see that situation or hear about that situation that we went through and say, y'all might have been overreacting a little. He was just being helpful. But the reality is, we don't know what people's real intentions are, especially people that are just acquaintances or you've just met. And so it's possibly easier to set those boundaries with strangers or, you know, people that you don't know very well, because it's clear that you don't really know who they are. And, you know, old saying, stranger danger, is there for a reason. People might think, oh, nothing's going to happen. But let's look at the unfortunate data of how many children are victims of any type of sexual abuse, sex trafficking, even just, you know, feeling uncomfortable because of certain things that might be said to them that are just completely inappropriate, even if other lines don't get crossed. There's just a lot of people out there who have been victims of this stuff. And for us to say that it's not happening in the group that we're hanging out with, or in our family, or in that group of strangers, like there's no way that there's somebody who's doing that over there, that is completely naive. You have to understand that I'm sure all of the people that that has happened to look back and say, we had no idea he was the nicest guy, or even she. I keep saying he just because, again, that's my, you know, history and my triggers and stuff. But there's certain things with women as well that can happen. And I'm just thinking now of, you know, the sexual abuse and the inappropriate things that people can say. But again, there's physical, mental, and emotional abuse that can be happening to children that is equally as scary and that you need to protect them from. And so those people who have experienced this kind of stuff, a lot of times had no idea that that person was capable of it. A lot of times those people are the nicest person at the party because they are going through what's called grooming. And they're not only grooming your child to get comfortable and say, look, mom trusts me and look what I'm doing, but they're also grooming us as parents to say, hey, you trust me with your kid, no worries, they can come on over here with me. And it's just a very clear line that cannot be crossed with others. So don't let certain things happen right under your nose just because you're afraid to speak up, or you feel that it, you know, I would offend them if I insinuated at all that they could harm my child. That is not for you to apologize for. What you'd rather do is have to deal with that uncomfortableness than have to deal with a child who has been through any sort of trauma, or who has been, you know, put through just negative things in their life, and then they have to deal with that. And you, as well as the parent, have to deal with that and see certain things like them acting out down the road and not being sure what is going on. Why is this happening to my child? Or they might be allowing certain things to happen to them because they say, you know what, this was fine when I was a kid. Why can't I do this now? Last point I'm going to make on that as well is it is important to not only set boundaries for your children and around your children, but also for yourself, in the sense of, if you are allowing certain negative things to happen to you in your life, you're allowing people to talk to you in certain ways, you're talking about yourself in certain ways, or you're in an abusive relationship, that also can affect your child, because you might think, oh, it's fine, nobody's hurting them. But what they're seeing is you're modeling behavior, that this kind of behavior is acceptable. And this is what we deserve as humans or women or whatever it may be. And that is just totally going to be heartbreaking down the road if you experience your child then growing up, marrying somebody, dating somebody, or exposing themselves to people who are talking down on them, who are possibly abusive to them. And it's a very common generational cycle that happens, and people don't seem to be aware that they always wanted better for their child, but they never expected better for themselves. Therefore, they modeled that behavior to their child to be acceptable. So draw a line there too. You need to treat yourself the way that you would want somebody to treat your child. So there's a lot of boundaries, guys. We just went over so many different things that are crucial in making sure that your child feels safe, they feel heard, their voice is not being muted, and you are their protector. So think about it, talk about it with your family. Again, I'm not here to tell you what boundary is perfect and what boundary needs to be set. It's not a perfect formula of how to do these things, but listen to your parent gut, listen to your red flags going off, and don't be afraid to ruffle feathers, to remove yourself from people, toxic people, whether that is friends or family. I'm very fortunate that we have great family that we can trust with our child, but I've listened to a lot of mamas talking about just negative stuff going on in their family and very toxic behaviors that they have to come to uncomfortable conversations with grandparents or aunts and uncles or even siblings and just saying, we're not going to have you watching them overnight or by yourself, or if we're around and we catch you saying a certain thing, we're going to correct you on that. And it is uncomfortable, but guess what? You are their voice. So don't be afraid for that. All right, guys, that is my spiel on setting boundaries with others for your child. If you have any questions about parenthood or this episode, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope y'all have a blessed day. Bye.